Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day. Welcome to Don't Quote Me on That. One day we will have an intro, but today is not that day.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Kalina, and welcome back to Don't Quote Me on That, where we kind of talk about movies. And for once, the movie part in that tagline is true, the we part is not. But that's okay, because I am talking about a movie finally, so I think that makes up for it. Just to give you a little life update, I guess. Actually, I don't have a life update. I think everything's pretty much the same as the last time I saw you. Here I am in my chair. Knee is still bum. However, I have graduated to one crutch, which you can see back here. So, it's about little victories. So I'm pretty pleased about that. Eleanor's doing Eleanor's thing, you know. But in relation to my bum knee, I have a bit more free time on my hands, as I'm sure we have discussed. Due to that free time, I went to the movies for the first time in a while and I watched Him, which is what we're going to talk about today. So Him was released September 19th of this year. I went and saw it about September 21st, so opening weekend. It was directed by Justin Tipping, who directed Kicks, Nani, Lowriders. I don't know any of those movies, but that's what came up when I clicked on his name. It's produced by Jordan Peele, which was a big draw for this movie. It's a Monkey Paw Productions, which is Jordan Peele's production company, and they have obviously done Get Out, Us, the Candyman remake, which I really enjoyed, and Monkey Man, which I haven't seen yet, but I would really like to watch. It's Dave Patel's film. And the movie stars Marlon Wayans and Tyreek Withers and Julia Fox. And so I just want to chat a little bit about it. I have seen a lot of reviews for the film after watching it, and I think I'm glad I saw reviews after I saw the movie because I maybe wouldn't have gone to see it because a lot of the reviews I saw were negative, which I was really surprised. Now, more recently, like even like today and yesterday during research for this episode, I saw more positive reviews, but a lot of them weren't even so much positive in so much that they were just kind of reactions and responses to negative reviews. So they weren't negative, but they weren't exactly inherently positive either. I only saw maybe two or three trailers for it. I just kind of went to the movie because I was like, well, I have some time. And that was the only thing that seemed remotely interesting to watch. But the couple of trailers I saw, it was definitely marketed as more horror, I would say. And I do think it falls more into the line of like a psychological thriller. Like it wasn't as gory as I was expecting to be. It was much more cerebral. Definitely had that Jordan Peele feel in that sense. But I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a good movie. I do think that it helped that I went in knowing virtually nothing, having no expectations. But I'm going to kind of break it down in terms of the cinematography, the acting, and then touch on the themes because the themes of the movie are obviously what make the movie, but they're also where these very divisive sides of these reviews come in and where like a lot of people have been negative is how the themes of the movie were handled and executed. So to get right into it, I suppose I should probably start with like a recap of the plot. So there will be spoilers in this. I like try my best to do non-spoiler, but then I forget like the order things happen in pretty often, and obviously like it is a film review, so there will be so just a warning. So just a warning, there will be spoilers ahead. So if you do plan on seeing him, which I would recommend, think it's a I do think it's a movie worth at the very least passing your time with. Don't watch any further because there will be spoilers after this point, but I'll run you like through just a recap of the plot. So him follows Cameron Cade, just played by Tyreek Withers, and Cameron Cade's like the top NFL prospect. And he just trains and trains. He's really good. He's been like a loyal football fan, athlete since birth, essentially, and he's very like family focused. It's a family affair, this football thing. But he's like the top prospect. But right before the combine, he gets attacked by a crazed fan wearing a like the costume of a mascot, and so he's got like TBI, like a brain injury, like staples in his head, going into the combine. Doesn't perform well, suffering the effects of that injury, obviously. Doesn't perform well, gets the opportunity to train with Isaiah White, played by Marlon Wayans, who is the GOAT. He's like the Tom Brady of this universe in terms of football. He's got 8 rings. He's just the best to ever do it. He is him, hence the name. So he gets invited to train with Isaiah White just 1 week, and after that, they're like, listen, we'll get you a contract, we'll get you an offer. You just come spend a week with me, see how I do it. We'll see what we think of you. We'll get you going. So obviously, he takes the opportunity. He goes and spends the week with him. Things take a turn that Mr. Cameron Cade did not expect them to take. And they just get weirder and weirder. And we bring up these themes of football and fandom and I'm going to give it away later, but like religion and cults and sacrifice. And also, running throughout all of this is this layer of race and hierarchy and class. Again, those are themes we're going to touch on later, but I think things were like really like the all of these themes were interwoven really well. So I kind of broke down my review into three main themes, but they all touch on each other essentially. But to get the basic stuff out the way, cinematography, just visually, this film is stunning. That's one thing I have seen everyone agree on. I gave it an 8 out of 10 in terms of cinematography. One thing that I saw was really interesting. I just watched an interview Justin Tipping did with Dead Meat James on TikTok. I didn't watch the whole interview, but I saw a clip of it where they were talking about how they basically jerry rigged a camera setup in the movie because we're dealing with this head injury, because we're dealing with like very visceral. I wouldn't call it. I guess it is body horror actually, but we're really dealing with some body horror and like a contact sport. So to kind of, in one way, soften the blow, but another way showed like the true effects of these types of injuries on people. They jerry rigged like a thermal camera, so it kind of looks like these like head-on collisions quite literally happen, and these characters kind of go into this like X-ray looking shot. And Justin Tipping, the director, said they like jerry rigged a thermal camera so that they didn't do it in post. It was like a lot of practical effects, which I thought was really cool, and I think it also really brought the that visceral feeling to the audience, for lack of a better phrase. Speaking of audience, I went and saw this in theaters. I don't think this is a movie that like has to be seen in theaters. I've seen that said about a few movies lately, and because I think one like a theater is just a dying environment, like where loss of third spaces and all that. But I went to the theater. There was 9 of us in the theater, which to be fair, I went like on a Sunday afternoon, so maybe everyone was busy. Sunday I don't think is like top tier movie watching time, but it was good. I don't think you have to see this movie in theaters, but I do think it was fun. It was, it's like a dark setting you're in. It's really kind of added to the element. Maybe if there was more people in there, I would have enjoyed it more. Back to the cinematography. Cameron doesn't isn't like the most reliable narrator, and so it kind of using this sort of imagery, this X-ray imagery, strips things back emotionally, but also makes you queasy. I don't get queasy very often, but like these scenes and everything seemed much bloodier in these X-ray scenes. And Justin Tipping said like they're filming on this thermal camera and he's just pouring water over the actors' heads, things like that. So I think that was a really cool use of practical effects. I love practical effects. Eleanor and I have talked on this show a lot about CGI as a tool and how it is, I think, abused a lot the longer we've had it. But that's a conversation for another day. Another thing in terms of like the cinematography and the themes of the movie, there's this really, really, really cool shot towards the end of the film where Cameron is sitting at the middle of like a long table and we're getting like a Last Supper esque scene when he's being interviewed by reporters. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later when we talk about the themes of this movie. But I find it really interesting because a criticism I've seen of the film is that the message isn't clear, which is crazy because then we have shots where Cameron is quite literally Jesus sitting at the Last Supper, you know? But then on the other hand, I've seen many criticism where the message was too heavy handed. So I think there's a lot to be said about media literacy in today's day and age, and also some people's inability to digest a message not meant for them, and some people's inability to digest a message meant for them because of how it makes them feel. Cinematography on this film was beautiful. As I said, I gave it 8 out of 10. Onto the acting, which is another criticism I saw, and I didn't, at the time watching the film, wasn't particularly like, oh, this acting's horrible, or oh, this acting's amazing. It was fine. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I don't think there's particularly like standout performances. I will say Marlon Wayne's, I can see the argument this is the performance of his career, but I'm not too shocked by that because I truly believe that comedy is the most important basis for a good performance. Like, I think if an actor can't do comedy, yeah, you can do a drama, you can do an action movie, but you can't do them as well. Or like you could be a great action star, but put you in a comedy movie and you'll flail. So I just think comedy is the basis of a lot of acting skill. We all know Marlon Wayans can do comedy. Um, Tyreek Withers, I think he gave a solid performance. I have never seen him in anything before this. I've seen a lot of interviews he's done since watching the movie. Like, just I've seen a lot of stuff they've done on the promo circuit for this film. He has charmed me. Seems like a funny young man. He's from Florida, and as soon as I realized, or as soon as I learned he was from Florida, I said, "Oh no, that everything about you makes sense." I'm from Florida, so that's not a drag. Love being from Florida. I think if you know I'm from Florida, it makes a lot of sense. One thing I will note in terms of Tyreek White's performance is that at some points I definitely felt it could have been a little bit stronger. He could have given a little bit more. However, due to, again, the head injury his character suffers, I think it lends to that kind of unreliable narrator aspect of the story. So I don't know if that was an intentional choice or if it's just something that worked out for him in that way. But also, it seems like from what I've seen, he's early on in his career. So I definitely like. I think for someone early in their career, it's a strong performance, and he'll definitely develop with time. Then someone who I didn't know was in this movie, and I was like genuinely surprised I enjoyed as much was Julia Fox. She plays Isaiah White's wife, Elsie White, I think is her name, and she, to be honest, played a character that I imagine Julia Fox already was, pretty much, at least until the end. Just rich, kind of eccentric lady. But she gave a really, I think she gave a convincing performance. But again, I feel like to me that's who Julia White is in my head, and I don't know that much about her, so could be blurring the lines of that. And it was funny. It. She added comedy almost in a movie where comedy wasn't really there. It was no by no means a funny movie. Obviously they're cracking some jokes, but I think she added this levity to scenes that she was in that was both surprising and welcome, and also made the ending of the film that much more moving, for lack of a better word. There were some side characters. There was a doctor who I thought his performance could have been better. I don't know the guy's name. But again, like, I think part of this comes back to media literacy. Some of those scenes were a little heavy handed for the doctor for me, but I think sometimes you need that to kind of like get your message across and give it to the people because media literacy is at an all time low, in my professional opinion. And like the family and stuff, we didn't like Cam's family and stuff, we didn't really have time to see that get fleshed out. Think it could have been better. At the end of the day, really, you can fill in the blanks. You know what a family dynamic is like. You know he has a supportive family. Like that, the core of the message gets across. The last thing I'll talk about before we go on to the themes is the soundtrack. And all I have to say about the soundtrack was it was very good. When I talk about soundtrack, I'm not really talking about score. The soundtrack, the songs they picked for this movie, fantastic. We've got Denzel Curry has "Him," which I think is, the titular song. Go on TikTok, okay? Everyone on TikTok eating the soundtrack up. I think soundtrack and cinematography were the two things everyone agreed on, and they agreed they were fantastic. So, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm gonna move on to the themes. The themes, there's quite a few. I tried to simplify them as much as possible, and just in terms of having less to talk about here, I did kind of distill some, like, or I guess combine some themes into one thing. So I've got three themes that I want to touch on. The first one is celebrity slash sport slash football as religion. And I do think this theme kind of shows part of the reason I like this movie. I'm a little bit biased in this sense. Eleanor and I have spoken a lot on the show about the idea that celebrity is the modern day God, which, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, I will delve into in this episode. But just celebrity as religion. That's theme one. Theme two is the commodification of black people, specifically black men, which is a message I think gets lost, not on the part of the film, but on the part of the fans. And the third theme is becoming a man. And this kind of, again, they're all tied into each other because it's like becoming a man is tied to achieving success, which is kind of achieving success kind of links into the celebrity slash fame slash sports slash football argument. So they're all looped, but that's what I broke them down into. Those are the three things I felt I could discuss the easiest, discuss the best, give points and examples for. So going into theme number one, celebrity. I'll call it celebrity as religion. Specifically in the context of this film, it's football as religion and football players as religion, but celebrity as religion. I think this is amplified when it comes to sport. Obviously, this is a media show, so when Ellen and I talk about celebrity as religion, we usually talk about actors, singers, and the ways that we idolize these people, we put them on platforms in the same way we quite literally view God as higher than, or view these idols as higher than, better than, greater than. It's just now they're more tangible, which I think makes that conception more dangerous because they seem more reachable, more realistic. And not that God isn't realistic, religion isn't realistic, but it's more visceral. It's something I could almost touch, I could practically touch. You know. I mean, I'm in America. Respectfully, people are crazy about like they're insane about American football. They're insane about the NFL. Those are some of the best paid people in the country, if not the world. Okay, for something that is a game. I believe that professional athletes should be paid that well, but I think that all professional athletes should be paid that well. I also think, teachers and whatnot should be paid that well. But I think being a professional athlete is a valuable service. I also think that fandom in the context of sports is seen as more valuable and more, I guess, worthwhile than being a fan of an actor, being the fan of a band. I mean, there's that world famous, I don't know, world famous is the right word, but like very popular argument of against girls being fans of boy bands and how like they're belittled, whereas like it's totally perfectly fine and normal for a grown adult man to know every single thing. I don't know any football players. Tom Brady has done in his career, You'd be like, oh, Tom Brady broke his toe when he was 12. Like, guys know that, but it's lame when a girl or like, even like a 20 something year old woman is like, like knows the history of One Direction. Okay? Which is a different conversation for a different day. But celebrity as religion, amplified when it comes to sport. What I liked about him is that it looked at it from the perspective of the athlete. A lot of times when we have these discussions, we're looking at it from the perspective of the fan and the ways that the fan behavior is detrimental to both the athlete and themselves. Whereas here, it's the athlete behavior and the organization, like in this case, the team he's trying to get signed for, they're called the Saviors. Um, but the way the organization harms these athletes while simultaneously putting them on a pedestal. The idea of sacrifice comes up a lot, which I think is a theme in the film in itself, but I believe it relates to the other three. So, in regard to the celebrity as religion theme, sacrifice comes up very often. And to simplify it and to kind of just tell you to make my argument easier to make, it's almost as though Isaiah slash Cameron are Jesus. Okay, they are as close to God without actually being God. They are the saviors. That's the name of the team. Okay, they are the saviors. They are the the ones who walk the earth in a way that God has not. And so, what did Jesus do? Sacrifice. I'm sure someone will tell me, well, God sacrificed his son. Yes, but Jesus was the one who physically went through that experience. In the same way, the athletes are the ones who physically put themselves on the line. Okay. One of the posters for this movie actually have Cameron looking like Jesus. He's got his arms outstretched, so like making a cross. The sky behind, it's like sky behind him, and it's very, very blue. And then there is what it's actually like an archway. When you watch the movie, you'll see it, but it's actually an archway, but it looks like clouds. So it's very, very blue sky, very, very white looking clouds. Cameron in this cross pose, arms out, and he's got a football in each hand covered in blood. So Cameron is Jesus, right? And part of the question that, well, one question that I want to know is then who is God in this scenario? And I do think it would be the organization in this sense, is these people who you don't see, they're faceless. You never touch them, you never talk to them, but they make all the decisions, whereas the athletes are the ones who come live among us, so to speak. And then in that vein, I guess that would make the fans the disciples and the followers. And in another vein, on the idea of sacrifice, is what is the athlete? What is Cameron? What is Isaiah willing to sacrifice? And one thing that has to be sacrificed or in a way replaced is family. Isaiah says, "Oh, you know the saying, it's God, family, football. For me, it's football, family, God, right? Like football comes first." And he tells Cameron that he can't be solely motivated by his family. He needs to find something else to be motivated by. But at the same time, there's a scene where they essentially they hurt one of the reserve players I mentioned earlier. They hurt a player who's like coming to practice with them every time Cameron fumbles a pass, drops the ball, whatever. They hurt this player in a very horrid way. And Isaiah says to Cameron, he's like, "Come on, like you're hurting him over here. He's counting on you. You know, that's your boy. That's your family, essentially. So you have to sacrifice your actual family and replace it with something greater, essentially. And the team is greater. The team is greater. The sport is greater. You are greater." There's also this reoccurring concept of blood swapping, and I think that obviously like very clearly links to the idea of communion in the Christian faith. So sometimes a little heavy-handed, which again, like I said, I've seen criticisms on both sides. The film's heavy-handed; it's not obvious enough. That one I felt was like kind of given to us. In sports, there's very often a mascot, and a mascot is who attacks Cameron at the beginning of the film and causes his injury. We see mascots throughout the film later on. Isaiah and Cameron are out like just they're trying to, they're doing something different. They're doing an outdoor activity, so they're out shooting targets, and at one point they shoot a mascot. A couple times Cameron hallucinates, sees a mascot, and when he first gets to the training camp with Isaiah, Isaiah says to him, "Don't be a mascot," and he also tells him, "Don't be like me," which I think I'll bring up a little bit later. But he says, "Don't be a mascot," and I kind of thought in terms of celebrity as religion, mascots being these false idols to a real god. The athlete in this case is the real god. So I view it as Isaiah White, who is the goat, the one we're trying to emulate, being like, don't be a false idol or false prophet. Be the real thing, because again, you have to sacrifice so much, so you have to at least make sure what you're sacrificing for is worth it. And if you're sacrificing to be a false idol, what's the point? And if I think about a little more about the Cameron as Jesus aspect or idea, Cameron, I think I said this in the last episode, or the episode I did on the US women's national team show I watched, Under Pressure. I think it's Megan Rapinoe says at one point, like, if you can see it, you can achieve it, you can exceed it, something along those lines. And I use the example of like people breaking Michael Phelps's record. Michael Phelps was built to swim. Okay, that man's just built a little different, physically, mentally, and he was the standard for swimming for so long. And I think also the standard of like discipline as an athlete. But that aside, people are breaking those records now, on multiple fronts, and that's a good thing because these kids grew up knowing, okay, this is what can be achieved. Before, this is what was achieved. This is what can be achieved. I can do more. And I think in this movie with the Cameron as Jesus is Cameron has seen what Isaiah White can do. It's like quite literally been fed to him since childhood. Okay, this is what a man does. Is what that's what something Cameron's father says being in the film. Isaiah White gets injured, and he makes Cameron watch it on the screen. He says, "That's what a man does. He sacrifices. This is what men do. This is what successful people do. This is what successful athletes do. This is what talented people do." And at the end, Cameron chooses a new path. Cameron has been doing all of this to succeed Isaiah, to get a contract, to be the greatest of all time. And the price that he has to pay to get there, he's not willing to pay. But rather than walking away from it entirely, he picks a third, like a secret third option, essentially, and chooses a new path. So I think if he's Jesus, or if Isaiah is Jesus in this example, the thing is, the Jesus mantle passes back and forth between the two of them throughout the movie. Um, but if Isaiah is Jesus, Cameron has seen what Jesus can do. Okay, the followers of God know what their God can do. Okay, in any religion, they know what their prophets are capable of. So they have a standard to strive to reach. Now, I know, at least in every conception of religion I can think of, we can never achieve the goodness, the glory, the perfection that God is, you know? But we can strive to it. We can strive to be good people, nice people, kind people, good neighbors, all of those things. So Cameron wants to reach what Isaiah has reached, but also maybe is a little bit more earthly, I guess, in this case. Because when Isaiah is Jesus, Cameron is the disciple. When Cameron is Jesus, the fans are the fans are always the disciples. But he's a bit more earthly. He hasn't been out of it as long. He still has roots. These things that Isaiah has very clearly given up, family and things of that nature. I hope that made sense. I feel like I lost my train of thought halfway through, and like I know what the thought is, but I hope you also know what the thought is. I bullet pointed things, but it's a little disjointed. Guys, I don't know if I've said this, but don't tear your ACL, okay? It's uncomfortable. I can't find a nice position to sit in for longer than like 5 minutes. But anyway. And then the last thing in this vein of in this theme of celebrity as religion is from the fan perspective. These fans give you the power with Isaiah as Jesus in this example, but with Isaiah as the central focus of their attentions, he gets his power and his he gets his power and his strength from the fans loving him. Okay, a lot of times throughout the movie, Isaiah says, "Okay, I'm gonna go watch some film. I'm gonna watch some film," and we come to find out at the end of the movie that him watching film isn't actually him watching like football players or him playing or anything. It's he is surrounded, like just has this giant screen of fans cheering for him and telling him how great he is and that they love him. That's his film he's watching. That's what rejuvenates him. That's what makes him a better player. Not watching how a play is run, what mistake he made and how he can tweak it, but like the love and adoration these fans have for him reinvigorates him, essentially. So that's my theme of, or the movie's theme of celebrity as religion. So the next theme is the commodification of black people and specifically black men. I do think on a larger scale, the theme is the commodification of athletes, but race is a very big theme in this film, and I do think some of the criticisms of the film that say the message wasn't clear, it didn't have a strong message, is just from viewers who haven't learned how to hear that message, is how I will phrase it. Specifically, like focusing in on the commodification of black people, black men, is the only way they're valued or given the means to progress is through skill slash performance. That's why it links back to race. And again, it's not that they perform and oh they're valued, but the ending of the film shows that that the organization, the higher ups, the institution give them give okay, they're doing them the privilege of giving them the means to prove themselves, and they have to prove themselves worthy. I think at one point Isaiah says in the film, he says, as a black quarterback I had to be great just to be considered good, which could apply to so many aspects of life for people of color. But focusing specifically on black men also, football is a pretty violent sport. It's a contact sport, pretty violent. And even when, like, we want these people, these athletes to perform well in this sport, but when they're black men and they perform well, it's like they can never be separated from that stereotype of violence at the same way. But we're celebrating them for the violence because it's violence on our terms and within our parameters. And oh, see, they've proven that they can never move beyond that stereotype, but it's okay because we've sanctioned it, right? And as I mentioned earlier, at one point Isaiah says, "Don't be a mascot" to Cameron, and it's like, no matter what you do, you have to play a role in this game they've set out for us, but don't be a mascot. Don't be something that's stereotyped and stripped down to like the basics and not like a real person, and you get none of the benefit of that fame. Again, Isaiah's reaping the benefits of having fans that reinvigorates him. If you're a mascot, you don't get that same attention and love and adoration. Something Isaiah brings up at the beginning that I wish was explored a little bit more was is like the Native Americans and their influence on the game. When Cameron first gets to the house, Isaiah is tanning hides, and there's like photos of people standing in front of cattle skulls and things like this. And that's when he says the "don't be a mascot," and he tells Cameron about how the position of the quarterback came about. And it was thanks to the Native Americans. And then a little later on in the movie, he talks about a couple times. Isaiah White talks about like this tradition of sending Native Americans sending their young boys out into the woods to become men, to become warriors, and sending them out into this trial, which is essentially what that sport is doing to these athletes, to Isaiah and Cameron specifically in this movie. And how we've taken all these things from the Native Americans and left and claimed it as our own. And again, when I say our, I mean the culture, the American culture, the institution of football, the institution of class and hierarchy and race that exists. But we've taken, like, you bring like the mascots. We've had what the Redskins and the Indians, right? Like, we've had football mascots, football teams that claim to be honoring these tribes, these people, but really it's just a commodification of something they gave us that they reap no benefit from. In the same way that a lot of times I think in culture, popular culture specifically, black culture is taken from and not given any credit or benefit. Style, music, slang, things like that. And so, how we are, again, don't be a mascot, Cameron. We are taking all the quote unquote good things from these black men, applying them to the game and to the sport and the institution as a whole. And if they're lucky, they get to reap some benefit of adoration and fame and platform, however shaky and insubstantial and not true that platform is. And then, as I mentioned a little earlier, the black man always being perceived as violent. The ending, Cameron chooses, big spoiler here, okay? So if you haven't tuned off yet, I don't know why you haven't. The big spoiler for the ending, Cameron essentially has been prepped to defeat Isaiah, okay? The two of them are going to duke it out. Last man standing wins. That person gets to continue or gets to be the greatest of all time. And Isaiah explains how Cameron's been infused with the blood of with Isaiah's blood and the blood of the goat before him and the goat before him and the goat before him, all the way to the beginning of time of football. Okay, that's kind of what we've been leading up to this whole time. Now they got to duke it out. Whichever one of them walks out the tunnel gets to be the goat. Isaiah obviously still wants to be the GOAT. They're on an even playing field now, though, because Cameron has been infused with everyone's blood. Cameron defeats him, kills him, walks out through the tunnel. Okay, that's where we get that scene. He's covered in blood. The too blue sky, the clouds that are too white. Also, there's some planes flying overhead, and they're like streaming red, white, and blue. Like, what's the word? Red, white, and blue smoke, vapor. You know when planes fly and they release whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. Because we're in America and it's the American dream, right? He walks out the tunnel. There's this whole production. There's cheerleaders. There's a mascot. The entirety of the Saviors, that's the football team's organization, is there. Isaiah White's wife's there, which she's been in on it this whole time, which we realize a little later in the film, waiting for Cameron to sign his contract. Instead of signing the contract, because Cameron's like, that's crazy. Also, back to that theme of sacrifice, it turns out that we know Cameron's dad died, but it turns out Cameron's dad died specifically to propel Cameron to where he's at. Because a lot of the time, it seems like he's doing this for his family and specifically his father, who loved football and loved the Saviors and loved Isaiah White so much. So his dad was the sacrifice that jump started him to where he is now. Instead of signing the contract, Cameron kills everyone but one person. Very bloody, very violent ending. Okay. So even in choosing this new path, back to my commodification of black men, in choosing this new path, Cameron still can't escape that violent portrayal, right? Like, and obviously, I don't think it's gonna, like, in the universe of the film, it's not gonna come out like Cameron Cade kills or Savior's organization, you know? But what am I trying to say? But he is still going to fall into the negative stereotypes because we have to commodify them somehow, but also not make them human. And in one way, we're making them less than human by stripping them to these baseline stereotypical traits of violence and anger and power, but also making them more than human by making them gods, by making them stars that have fans that idolize them. Yes, you're with me. You're with me. Third and final theme. Also, brief pause. If anyone's ever considering doing a podcast or like a show, like something, in my, how do I put this? Brief pause. My eyes hurt. Okay, I've got this ring light here to record. My eyeballs are on fire. Okay, I'm hot. It's hot. I hate talking for so long. I'm sweating. I never sweat. Like, I know I live in Florida and I'm wearing jeans because I'm trying to look presentable. I have the air on. I'm sure you can hear it. I'm sweating. So, when those influencers are like, ugh, it's like, it's so much, it's like so much worse than a 9 to 5. They're wrong. It is hard work. I'm not an influencer by any means. I'm not claiming to be. I'm talking to probably 3 people right now, but my eyeballs hurt and it's hot. I just wanted to share that with you all. My third and final theme, becoming a man. I think I mentioned it earlier. Isaiah White brings up the Native Americans early in the movie, and one thing he brings up quite frequently is the Native Americans sending their teenage boys out into the woods to become men, to become warriors. In this universe, we are sending them to the football field to become men, to become warriors. It strips these athletes of any sort of emotional depth in the same way that being a god strips them of a lot of traits. I think all of the themes deal with the reduction of a person to someone else's conception of them, and in some ways that's good when they again are like athletes, celebrities, gods revered by their fans, by their followers, and it's bad when it's racially motivated or motivated by gender roles, I suppose, is how I will phrase that. One thing that's said very early on in the film I touched on is Isaiah White gets injured. His like shin bone is sticking out, okay? Cameron's dad is this young Cameron. They're watching the football game together, the whole family, and Cameron's dad makes him look at the screen and Cameron's dad says, "You see that? That's what a real man does. He sacrifices." Okay? He suffers. And to become a man, you have to suffer physically in that way. Cameron's got his TBI. Cameron headbutts someone when he's training with Isaiah, and Isaiah's finally, like, when he headbutts the guy and's got him laying on the ground. Isaiah's finally pleased with his performance, right? So you have to suffer physically to become a man. You have to suffer emotionally. Cameron comes from a very tight knit family, a very supportive family. He's got a long term girlfriend. He's got a brother. He's got his mom. They're very supportive of him in his journey. Okay, he does not talk to them the whole time he's at Isaiah's. I think he calls his mom and talks to his brother like once in secret, and it's not for very long. But he is isolated from them, so that's something he has to give up. And remember, now his football team will replace that family. Okay, then he has to kind of detach himself from his principles. One thing, like he's got the long term girlfriend, and Isaiah's white Isaiah White's wife, Elsie, is like, "Oh, do you want to party with us?" Because she's just got an entourage of girls. She's doing whatever like rich wives do, promoting products, being hot as you do. She's got this entourage of younger women that are probably around Cameron's age with her all the time. And she's like, "Are you sure you don't want to party with us?" And he's like, "No." And the first time she asked, she says, "No." The further on into this journey we go, and the more he's not really in his mind, the more he's broken down and stripped and all in under the premise of becoming a man and becoming the goat. Does party with these girls in bikinis wearing, virtually nothing. So he's stripped of his family, he's stripped physically, he's suffering physically, he's suffering emotionally, he's suffering, I guess, spiritually in terms of his principles, right? The thing that has guided him all this time, this drive, his family, are things he's told he needs to find a bigger purpose than, and he can no longer rely on because they're not with him. Also, just remembered, in terms of cinematography and the whole, like all of these themes, Cameron has a cross necklace. So he's got a religious family. He's wearing this cross. Throughout the time he's with Isaiah, the cross is always hanging in the back, so we don't see it. We see because he has two chains. He has the cross and something else, another pendant. The cross pendant is always hanging on his back, so we don't see it. Then, like towards the end of the film, all of a sudden the cross is in the front and the other pendant is behind. Now, take that with a grain of salt because I could be misremembering that, but that was the first thing I remember noticing in the film that I was like, oh, there is that theme, you know? So I thought that was interesting about how, like, when he's getting ready to forego the path he suffered for and been set on without realizing it, God kind of came back with the cross being in front. But we're talking about becoming a man. Another thing a man must do besides suffer is shoulder the burden of success. So Cameron is suffering to become a man. Cameron wants to become a man and provide for his family and give back to his family who have done so much for him. But he's the only one who's shouldering the burden of that, which is this traumatic brain injury, which is this essentially selling your soul to this organization, which is the violence that we enact on black bodies, the violence that we enact on athletes, all for his family to have comfort. But that's what a man does. There's definitely some stuff I've thought of as I've gone on about the first two themes, the celebrity as religion and commodification of black men, that I forgot to mention, but in an effort to wrap this up and not backtrack too much and make this too confusing, we will go on to some closing thoughts, some questions that I have, and some notes for the film as a whole. The note for the film as a whole is that I felt it could have been longer. I didn't really articulate this thought myself, but I walked out of the movie kind of feeling like we rushed, let's say, like the last 30 minutes. Like, I thought it was almost not too slow, but like almost too slow leading up to the climax. And then maybe like 15, 20 minutes before the climax of the movie, I was like, oh, well, I like now all of a sudden it's really speedy. And I like all the beats felt really quick. And I wasn't sure how we got to, okay, now Cameron's killing everybody, you know? So I saw some people online say that, oh, it could have been about 30 minutes longer. And I agree. I also wish we had delved more into the cult aspect of the organization. The organization is the bad guy, right? Specifically the Saviors organization, not like football as a whole. But we don't really see them until the end of the movie. And once when they're like kind of letting Cameron in on their club, and later on, then the second time when he's killing them. So we don't really see them. But I guess in a real way, you don't see those inner workings in real life either. But I do wish we had kind of, again, delved more into the cult and the history of the cult and like how far back do these goats go, you know? It's hard because at the same time, like, I don't believe we need to be spoon fed everything, kind of like that media literacy crisis I was talking about earlier. I do think audiences want to be spoon fed everything, and I don't want to be in that sort of audience. Like, I enjoy we left some things empty, or like left some things unknown. Like, what was Cam's fate after he walked out of there? Because how do you walk out of the room after killing everyone, and everybody knows you've been training with Isaiah White, and he's also dead? Like, how do you walk out of there and build a career? Do you keep playing football? Are you successful? How does that look? Do you not play football? Do you tell someone what you did? Do you never speak of it again? Is it all a fever dream? How much of that was true because he was suffering from a brain injury, you know? But I like that those answers weren't given to us at the same time, because then those themes, it would either make the movie, it would either have to lean into he hallucinated all of this because his brain is bad, and then it cheapens the themes, or we'd get fed an explanation, but like of how his future looked, right? Does he play football, things like that. But it would never answer every single question, you know? So, a question that Isaiah, another thing that just, you know, thoughts to think, to leave you with something to think about. At one point in the film, Isaiah says, if you were a prisoner and you were offered food or freedom, do you really have a choice? And genuinely, when he asked that question, like, Cameron doesn't pick one, right? At least not verbally. When he asked that question, like, do you really have a choice? I was like, yeah, like, I wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. Getting to the end of the movie, I think, in my interpretation, Isaiah is implying that the correct answer is food. If you are a prisoner and you're starving, right, and you're offered food or freedom, do you have a choice? You pick food because that will solve your problems. You don't know what freedom looks like. You don't know, will you get food when you are free? And when you reach the end of the film, you realize that Isaiah throughout his life has picked food. Okay? He has been the prisoner. He has been starving. He's picked food every time. But because he picks food every time, he can never escape. He is beholden to his captors. In this case, football is the food. And kind of back to my Michael Phelps and people breaking Michael Phelps's record example. To Cameron, the answer was freedom. Cameron picked freedom. Cameron did not go down the path they had laid out for him, and quite literally had laid out for him from, if not birth, from childhood. He doesn't pick the food. He doesn't pick the easy route. He doesn't sign the contract and reap the benefits and try to forget what it cost him to get there. He picks freedom. And I don't think either choice is wrong, but I do think I mean, actually, there's no follow up to that. I don't think either choice is wrong. Both choices are valid, and the more people we have to suffer for us, which they shouldn't have to, but the more people that suffer and go through these hardships, the more we are able to dream of a world where they don't have to. And that sounds very, I think, I don't know, very like deep for a psychological thriller, but it is a deep psychological thriller. It's not just like I'm watching The Conjuring, which, no hate to The Conjuring, I've never seen it, but I do think that's just like a horror movie. Something's creepy's happening. That's it. There's no like deeper message or comment on society. Whereas here, the deeper message slash comment on society is what makes it spooky. I feel like I was a little all over the place today, so I do hope you all were with me. And if not, my bad. Eleanor should be back next week. Um, and I should have more fun updates for you. It's more fun when I have a partner here, but a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do, and what a girl's got to do is record an episode. So thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't seen him, I would recommend checking it out. I think if you have more than 9 people in your theater viewing, it should be more fun than I had. But I'm not mad that there was only 9 people in mine. I'm excited to see what Tyreek Withers does with his career. I think he's a charming young man. I'm sure I said. Oh, also not related at all, but I have time to yap because nobody's here. And I finished oh, you know what? This is what Ellen and I should do. This is what Ellen and I should do. We should do the episode and then do all our yapping. Robert Irwin is on Dancing with the Stars right now, which is a crazy sentence to say. But Robert Irwin is on Dancing with the Stars, and every time I see Robert Irwin, like I feel about him in my heart the same way I feel about my younger brother. I'm just like, that's just a nice young man, you know? Robert Irwin, you're just a nice young man, and I wish you all the best in life, and I hope you're doing well, you know? Tyreek Withers, not quite the same vibe, but has charmed me. He just seems funny and like a cool, grounded guy. Who else did I think that about recently? That like I wasn't trying to like them, but I did. Oh, David Cornsweet, the Superman guy. Haven't seen Superman, heard good things. We'll try and check it out. But yeah, I watched a couple interviews with David Corn Sweat, I'm pretty sure. And I was like, David Corn Sweat, you've charmed me. So I do really like this direction. I feel like celebrities, male celebrities specifically, are taking in terms of their PR personas. Again, different conversation. Totally not related at all. What else? Oh, I'm working on like a TikTok on Bollywood movies. So if anyone has any recommendations on good Bollywood movies, I grew up on them, but I'm trying to step away from the 3 hour long song fests. Not because I don't like them, okay? I swear down by a 3 hour long Bollywood movie with a 10-minute song break for whatever reason so we can show every single famous person the director's ever met in their life. But I would like to watch some more like grounded stuff. Right now I'm watching Article 15, which is like a cop movie. Yeah, mystery. That kind of discusses or looks at the caste system and how it affects people in those lower castes. So it's interesting. No songs. Do think it'd be kind of weird if they started singing a song in the middle of that. But I also watched Kal Ho Naho recently. Life changing. I like hate to hate to be like, I love Bollywood movies, and then every single Bollywood movie I love has Shah Rukh Khan in it. But at the same time, like it's not my fault that Shah Rukh Khan is in interesting projects, fun, interesting projects. None of this has anything to do with anything though. So if you guys have any recommendations for movies I should watch, movies that are coming out specifically, sorry, speaking of movies that are coming out, Now You See Me 3 is coming out. And that weekend I have something to do and I'm already plotting my excuse for how I'm going to slip away in the evening to go watch Now You See Me 3. I will be seeing that in theaters. And the same weekend that Now You See Me 3 comes out, 5 Seconds of Summer is releasing their next album. So if no one hears from me for those 3 days, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I want you to know that I'm okay, but I am booked and busy. That being said, please drop any movie recommendations, preferably movies I could go watch in the theater. Please drop your Bollywood movie recommendations, preferably without songs because we're trying to evolve. Please tune in next week to see what we have for you. I have been Kalina. This has been Don't Quote Me on That. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Don't quote me on that. One day we'll have an outro, but it's not today.